This is not an April Fool's joke. The Dallas Cowboys have signed another free agent. We will discuss that and more on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your mailbag questions, including, does the relative athletic score matter? How much can Jalen Tolbert improve in year 3? But Landon, we're going to start with the signing of Chuma Edoga. Very mixed opinions on social media about Chuma, even from our good friend John Oney, who does not agree with this move. I happen to disagree with him. I kind of like this signing, but what are your thoughts on the Cowboys bringing back Edoga for another year?
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think it was a solid signing. I don't know if we're going to go out of our way to throw a bunch of flowers on re-signing a guy that's a swing tackle, right? But I think
is he a swing tackle?
Well, I guess a backup tackle, I guess. Let's say that, right? I think that what we saw last year was there was a push for him to be trying to play a little bit of guard tackle, right, at times. And I think that when he got in at guard, it left a bad taste in our mouth, right? And obviously fast forward to when he was actually needed to play in games, and he actually ended up playing a lot of tackle. And I think he was mostly decent as a tackle. I mean, especially considering he's a backup player, right, coming in.
Yeah.
I don't think he got you killed. And I think that kind of stability in the backup position is important, just to have a NFL competent offensive tackle on the roster, no matter what you do, because that way it gives you some flexibility if things don't fall your way in the draft, or if you decide that you want to try to go with a younger player at the position that's already on your roster, which that is an option that could happen here, right? Like, they may look at Asim Richards or Let's Go and say, hey, I think we should give these guys a shot at the opportunity. And if they would do that, you definitely would want a veteran presence there, right, to be the kind of safety net to catch you in case that doesn't work out. I think it just gives them a lot of flexibility to kind of do a bunch of different things. And if things don't fall the way they want, Chuma Edoga is he's not a great backstop, but I mean, just having a backstop at offensive tackle right now, I think, is important.
So a couple stats on Chuma Edoga. So last year there were 4 games where he started at left tackle. In those 4 games, he allowed 14 pressures, and I'm looking at the numbers right now, 7 hurries. Okay. So those aren't great numbers, but they're not disaster numbers either. Like, it's pretty much in line with what a below average left tackle does. Like, we've seen significantly worse tackle play. What's notable is in that the games that he started, there was multiple games where the Cowboys scored 40 or more points with him at left tackle. So he wasn't so bad that the offense was unable to score points. In fact, they were able to score a lot of points. Now, the Miami game, which is, I think, his last start at left tackle, is what people remember the most. He did not play a very good game in that one. He missed a block that could have easily been a touchdown down the field. But you're also kind of getting what you're paying for, right? You're paying this guy veteran minimum money. And to be honest, I think he way outperformed that last year. I'm fine with it. I think as a tackle, he can be what I call a 40 percentile tackle, which is perfectly fine. Like, that's all you need from your swing tackle. I really like the signing.
I think you're doing a great job of putting the proportion and putting the context here, right? Like you just mentioned, those numbers are pretty on par for, especially on a per game basis, a bottom half of the league offensive tackle, which that is not a great thing to hear unless you remember that we're talking about the backup tackle, right? Like
Yes.
you're just not going to have a backup tackle who's in the top half of the league, in any kind of metric. That's why they're a backup tackle. So it's just a different floor. It's just a different expectation that you have for these kinds of players.
Yes.
And look, even these guys are hard to find. Like even these backup tackles are hard to find. That's
I
why
agree.
there are guys of Chuma Edoga's quality probably starting in some teams in the NFL.
There's
So
10 teams that have this kind of quality. I want to give you a couple more numbers really quickly because I might not have done it a good job. Let's use a couple of his early season starts at left tackle against the Cardinals. We all remember this game. They were missing 3 offensive line starters.
Yeah.
He had 52 pass block snaps in that game, which is an absolute ton, right? 1 QB hit. Against the Patriots the next week, he had 38 and he had 0 QB hits allowed. Against the Dolphins, his worst game of the year, 43 pass blocking snaps, 2 hits allowed. So again, he's never going to make a Pro Bowl. He's not going to be a high caliber starter. But if you're dropping back to throw 50 times and your quarterback's only getting hit once or twice, like you can live with that.
yeah, and that's why I think, this is just a bad signing for the Cowboys nation right now because of all the other things that are happening. Everyone's just upset. Everyone's just upset that the Cowboys aren't doing more. And this is a, non-needle moving signing. It's an important, solid single. It's an important, down roster team building, but it's not sexy. And it certainly isn't going to more than make up for everything else that's happened this offseason. So I understand why Cowboys Nation is just generally in a bad mood. And so they woke up on the wrong side of the bed and they see this and like, who cares? But the truth of the matter is this is a fine signing. They're protecting themselves. It's not enough of good or bad to get upset or thrilled about. I think it's just, kind of procedural and just building the roster, solidifying things a little bit and opening up a runway for what is going to be the starting solution at tackle and providing, like I said, a very nice floor just in case things absolutely go disastrous. You at least, you have Chuma Edoga and then, whatever. Well, let's go Richards or whatever else you draft or, whatever else you sign in free agency.
2 more things before we move on. It's not like Chuma Edoga is this really old seasoned veteran either. Mm-mm. He's 26 years old. That's pretty young. And he got started in football pretty late. So would I be surprised if he got a little bit better this year? I'm not saying he's going to be amazing, but could he be 3% better than he was last year? Why not?
Absolutely. And this is also a guy, just to remind everyone, that's been bumped around a lot between guard and tackle, not just here, but also with the Jets and also at USC. So, I do think that there is a chance that he could get a little bit better with just more technique, more snap exposure. And even if he doesn't, like I said, he serves the function of providing a nice backstop in case disaster strikes. You can't get what you need at the tackle market. At the very least, you've got somebody who can be a backup tackle, and worst comes to worst, you can't find a decent starting one. You don't like it, but he could potentially be a starter, a potential starter if absolute disaster strikes and you absolutely don't have any other choices or any other adds to the tackle room.
I get the feeling that the Cowboys are comfortable having one spot be a weakness, or not a weakness, a little bit of an unknown going into the 2024 season. Like they're just not going to have a starting lineup like they had last year, whether it's like a Brock Hoffman at center or a TJ Bassett guard or a Chuma Edoga at left tackle. I think they know they're probably going to go into the season with one of those spots being a relative unknown. I think this signing opens up the possibility or the likelihood that the Cowboys will draft like a guard center in round 1, which to me means like Graham Barton and JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, are becoming even more likely picks in round 1.
I think that makes here we go. People are going to get upset with this. I think that makes a lot of sense because I think that when you look at Barton, you look at JPJ, and then you look at the equivalent tackles that are going to be available at 24. We've talked about Guyton. Jordan Patrick Morgan. Paul is a guy that's being pushed up in there. I mean, I'm talking about guys that are realistically going to be at 24. Of course, there's the chance that Feliz falls, or that, one of these other top guys kind of,
Fashanu, one of those guys.
Yeah, one of those guys falls. I mean, Fashanu, man, if
I
he
know.
fell, that'd be
I know.
crazy. But there is that chance. But if that doesn't happen, and you're left with the choice between Tyler Guyton or Barton or JPJ, like, that's not a choice for me. Like,
It's not me.
Barton and JPJ are just much better at their positions. And frankly, I think you can make an argument that Barton is better at Guyton's position at that point. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the Cowboys leaving themselves open and feeling like they can handle handle a weak link in the offensive line and figure out a way to work with it, or at least not a weak link, but a self-promoted guy, not like trying to go out and get a guy. And again, the other part of that issue is that the self-promoting guys that the Cowboys have, they're guards and centers too. Like, unless we see a little bit more from Austin Richards or Waletzko, which is also very possible. I liked a lot for what I saw those guys last year. It's going to be interesting to see, but I do agree that I think that they are kind of leaving this, potential, hey, we may solve one of these offensive line spots from within, just because you don't necessarily want to commit all your draft resources just to the offensive line.
All right, let's get to some more Twitter questions, including how much does relative athletic score really matter when it comes to drafting? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer that you get to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I love the last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute sports tickets, including concerts, comedy, and theater tickets. Plus, if you use the app, you can get exclusive in-app details on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We wanted to let you know about Locked On Sports Today. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news of the day, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, this next question comes from Zach, a longtime listener. He wants to know, how much does relative athletic score, RAS, how much does it matter when making selections?
I think it matters. It's a tool. It's a measurement tool. And I think, the thing that's valuable to me about the RAS scoring is that it's position specific, right? And so you are getting not just a kind of historical comparison on of all the athletes, but specifically in the silo of what position this person plays, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's like a lot of things where it certainly isn't the end all be all, but it actually helps you contextualize the athleticism a lot better. Sometimes it's just hard to kind of try to keep in mind all the standards and averages and means of all these scores. And so to have kind of a simple tool that like kind of gives you a point grading based on historical numbers at the position, it's just an easy way to take the numbers that you get at the combine and at these pro days and then give you the historical context of where this person is in the pantheon of the position, not just like in their own draft class, right? Like where they are for like historical comparisons. So I do think it's valuable, if only, just to kind of see where this person is in relation to their peers, and do they, again, a lot of times with this stuff, it's just about, do they have the requisite athleticism to survive, right, in the NFL? And for some of these guys, like Tyler Smith, as we see on the screen here, it's about showing how much like guys, are good athletes, and they likely will be able to kind of thrive in situations in the NFL.
So just a quick primer, if you've never heard of RAS before, it's basically a composite score of your size, your explosiveness, your speed, and your agility. And you get a score from 0 to 10, with obviously 10 being the best, 0 being the worst. Typically for first round picks, you want to see a score of at least 8 or better. Typically, most teams even want it to be closer to 9. And then as you get further down in the draft is typically where you see the lower level athletes get selected, or you see the opposite. You see teams gamble on great athletes with maybe bad film or lack of experience. So I think it does a better job than like Mock Draftable, where they just show you a chart of somebody's athleticism. It puts it all into context. And the other thing that I want to say, we should shout out Kent Lee Platt, who creates all these fantastic charts.
At MathBomb. Follow him on Twitter.
Yeah, at MathBomb. Yeah. He gets verified pro day numbers, not the garbage numbers that you see from people getting paid on Twitter to put out numbers. He gets the actual ones from teams, and it helps you at least get a fuller picture. And it matters because I'll use a guy like Darius Robinson, who the Cowboys are having in for a 30 visit. His RAS score was in the 90th percentile before he did the agility drills. He did the agility drills at his pro day. It tanked his score all the way down to, I think it's like 38 percentile among edge rushers right now. It's just a good tool to check a box, right? And I think it's the easiest and simplest way to see, oh, is this guy a good athlete or a bad athlete?
Yeah, or just to kind of, look, a lot of these positions have what I would say multiple flavors, right? Wide receiver is probably the best example of that. Like, there are so many types of wide receivers that win, right? There's short guys, there's tall guys, there's fast guys, there's technique guys, so getting the kind of relative athletic score kind of can show you a little bit of the type of athlete they are, and that kind of helps give you insight when paired with tape to what kind of game they have. And that shows Robinson right there. It shows you, right? He's an explosive, strong guy, but he's not going to run underneath a table, right? He's not going to bend the edge or beat you with speed around the edge, right? Like, I mean, even though he has that speed, without the kind of agility that doesn't quite unlock. So I think, and you see that in his tape, right? And again, that's kind of a lot of what you're doing with draft prospects, right? You watch on tape, and the athleticism is about confirming what you see on tape and making sure that it makes sense. This is a great example, right? You see a guy in Robinson on tape. Wow, he gets off the ball fast. Wow, he can really move. When asked to stop and change direction and kind of get back inside, that's when he's kind of struggling. It's like watching a ship, a big ship trying to turn, So those are the kind of things that, like, again, you're just trying to confirm what you see on tape so that you can feel more confident about your evaluation on tape. And then potentially also the other aspect of this is looking for guys who may have some athletic upside, right? Like guys that you see on tape, and, hey, their technique looks not so great. Then you see the testing and you're like, okay, this is why this guy is kind of in the conversation, because if you can teach him how to, get proper technique, that sort of athleticism is what we want to unlock. Those are the kind of guys you see getting drafted in the 5th, 6th round. Sometimes the undrafted free agents is just pure athletes who, the classic Will Ferrell, I don't know what to do with my hands, guys, that you can hope to teach how to play football, but are incredible athletes.
A couple of things I wanted to say really quickly here about just the RAS scores. It's pretty clear that the Cowboys have some kind of composite athletic score that they follow. You go back and you look at like their top 100 picks from the last 10 years, like in the Will McClay era, almost all of those guys are great athletes. Like Leighton Vander Esch was an historically good athlete coming out of the linebacker position. Same with Micah Parsons. We just saw that the Tyler Smith at left tackle or at tackle was an 87th percentile athlete. Mozzie Smith was number 1 on the freaks list. Luke Schoonmaker was like 5th overall at the tight end position, according to RAS. So it's a pretty good bet. Like, just follow the athletic testing and you're going to find out which guys the Cowboys like. And then the one thing I want to say just in general about how much does this matter, there's a saying that draft Twitter has had for a while now where not all good athletes are good players. There's very few poor athletes that are good players, and most great athletes most great players are great athletes. Like, look at the top players at the positions over the last couple of years, like Aaron Donald, number 1 all time in RAS among defensive tackles. Calvin Johnson, who just went in the Hall of Fame, number 1 all time wide receiver in RAS. Like, it's not a coincidence. Lane Johnson, number 1 all time on offensive lineman. It's not a coincidence that a lot of your best players in the NFL are also amazing athletes.
I mean, you can't be the best player at your position without being a great athlete. Like, it's that's just not a
especially
thing,
in today's NFL.
Yeah, especially in today's NFL. I mean, maybe the exception will be quarterback, but even then nowadays, like, you still got to be a pretty incredible athlete to play.
Look at Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty great athletes, right?
Yes.
So, I think that you look at it, and athleticism is not everything, but ultimately, it makes the most sense that the best players in the league have the combination of skill and athleticism, right? So
it should
obviously you can be one or the other, but if you're going to be the best, you got to have both, right?
It shouldn't be a surprise that athleticism matters in athletics, right?
No.
Typically the better athletes are the better players, and that's why the RAS scores do matter. And it's why it's a big deal when we post them on Twitter, and why we care so much about how well a player scores going into the draft. We got more questions, including one from our friend Sigmund Bloom about how good can Jalen Tolbert be in year 3. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet on the tournament, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. FanDuel actually also just released their NFL win totals. The Cowboys are sitting at 10.5, so you can go bet over or under on that. I know everybody is down on the Cowboys right now, but FanDuel is not. They still really like them. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a big win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions, and this one comes from a friend of the show, Sigmund Bloom, who wants to know, how big of a leap can Jalen Tolbert make in year 3?
Well, first of all, love to get a question from the great Sigmund Bloom, who
Yes.
is fantastic. You guys make sure you check out Football Guys podcast when you get a chance. But I think that Tolbert is, I think, not surprising, Sigmund's got his finger on the pulse, right? I think Tolbert is a guy who's due for a jump. I kind of expected more of a jump from him last year, based on what we saw in training camp. I mean, if you remember, again, not to use one of Sigmund's terms, the drumbeat of what we heard from Jalen Tolbert all throughout the training camp. And I mean, obviously I was there for a lot of it and saw just like, day in and day out, there was just so many days where he was the MVP of the day, or he was, like, he made the most play. He made the play of the day. And when we got into the regular season, I think you saw it a little bit. You definitely saw a jump. You definitely saw that he was significantly better than what he was as a rookie. He couldn't even get on the field as a rookie, right? Like, so you saw that he had, when he was given opportunities, he made plays. He, for the most part, I thought, was converting on his opportunities. I think there was 1 or 2 times I remember that he had like a drop later on in the season that was a key drop. But I think for the most part, when given the opportunity, he had really done a good job. But I think, if anything, it was about finding a consistency in his game, right? And I think that is where he's going to need to take the kind of next step in this offseason. Obviously, year 3 is a huge year for young players, but I would say even more, especially for someone like Jalen Tolbert, who basically kind of had a redshirt year, was coming from a small school, was making an enormous jump in competition between where he came from to the NFL. And I think the third year is where you are hoping that they have kind of finally put it all together, and that they are able to kind of take that jump. They've got a year, at least a year plus of snaps underneath their belt. They know what the NFL speed looks like. And again, he came into camp last year and really showed you a lot of really good stuff. I tend to think that he is, going to come in at the, best shape of his life season hashtag, right?
Yeah.
But I do believe that he's going to come in, like at his top form that we're going to see while under his rookie contract, because he's gotten another year in the training camp. He knows what he's trying to do. And I also think that the Cowboys have a better idea of how to deploy him, a little bit more. And I think that they're going to just intentionally give him more opportunities this year because, of just the way that the contracts are kind of sorting out. Gallup is now gone. So basically it's really easy for you to just have Tolbert kind of step right into that spot, which he already was basically doing by the end of the year last year. I just think, yes, year 3, more targets, another year of growth, and a guy that needed some time to kind of develop. I think that this is the year we really see Tolbert kind of step up. I would not be shocked if he messed around and became wide receiver 2 on this team by the end of the year, simply because he has a valuable skill set once he can kind of unleash it. And he kind of does stuff that the other 2 guys don't do as much.
Correct.
Right. And I think that if he can kind of lean into that a little bit, especially do some more X stuff, then I think Tolbert, could potentially take a leap and get kind of wide receiver 2 type numbers.
I mean, the Cowboys were basically telling us at the end of the year, like, they just like Tolbert better than Michael Gallup. In the final 10 games of the season, Jalen Tolbert averaged over 30 snaps a game. I mean, that's quite a lot for your number 3 or your number 4 receiver, especially on a team that was using a bunch of 2 tight end sets and was using some fullbacks every once in a while. Maybe they should use that guy more. So, I mean, for him to play that many snaps down the stretch in the Packers game, like, played even more than Brandon Cooks, like, and Michael Gallup in that game. This is his year. And I think the Cowboys are going to give him every opportunity to kind of develop into that number 2 receiver, because I think they would maybe like to scale back Brandon Cooks' snaps a little bit, not because he's an inefficient player, but just to keep him fresh and healthy as you get to the end of the year. I think the Cowboys are really going to lean into Jalen Tolbert being the number 2 receiver on this passing attack.
Yeah, I think you need a guy that is going to eat up snaps, going to be a good blocker. And again, I think you said it. It's not that Cooks is inefficient, but I think you could get better efficiency out of him by, using him more as a rotation and not having to have him out there for 50 snaps of pass plays, right? Because, like, you're throwing the ball all the time. So, I do think that Tolbert is a guy who, and look, we haven't really had this kind of guy on the team that's like a valuable receiving piece, but also does a lot of the dirty work stuff and can be a blocker and can be on special teams. That's the other thing that kind of developed for him last year is he became he became a special teams player last year, which he hadn't done in college. So
I don't think he's going to be asked to do it this year.
But I think this year he's going to be the guy that's like doing the, he's going to be a key blocker in running games. He's obviously going to do the wide receiver stuff as well. But I think that part of his job as being a starting wide receiver will be to kind of, take some of the dirty work stuff, the Noah Brown, Michael Gallup stuff, where you're the point of attack blocker on the edge. So it'll be,
if he doesn't, watch out for Jalen Brooks, because that's the guy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's going to pass Jalen Tolbert on the depth chart. I think that's too bold, but I won't be surprised if it's Jalen Brooks that is doing that. You know how there's some obvious situations where it's like first down and there's one receiver on the field, and this is where they give CeeDee Lamb the break, and it's Jalen Brooks coming into the field, and Brandon Cooks and Tolbert and CeeDee are all on the sideline. Like, I think Brooks's role is going to grow in this offense as well.
Yeah, I do too. Honestly, you saw Brooks last year kind of. I think that Brooks ended up last year almost to where Tolbert was, and he's a year behind.
I think
so like, that's the kind of, like, I think that Brooks is going to be a gritty, solid technician as a wide receiver who is going to be a very valuable 4th wide receiver for this team, because he's going to fit that role. He's going to run your routes right. He's going to do the dirty work. I mean, we saw it last year on one of those toss sweeps or reverse or something, he was the lead blocker and he was burying his corner. And I think it was CeeDee Lamb running behind him up the field. So yeah, I do think that you've got two Jalen's at the bottom of your depth chart that you are excited to see where they take their next steps. And both of them seem to be kind of at that point in their career development where they're about to step over that precipice and really take a big step in their careers.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to discuss some of the 30 visits for the Dallas Cowboys because it's pretty clear what the Cowboys are going to try to accomplish in this draft. They're telling you what they're going to try to do with the 30 visits. We will break all that down again on Thursday's show. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out the show on YouTube as well. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.